Right. Welcome to episode 2 of the Cornermen podcast.
It's already, John. It's technically our third.
Yeah, I know, but we kind of went for the pilot. So we had the pilot there. Well, number 1 was the pilot.
And like in a book, you get the introduction chapter. Then
yeah, exactly. So proper was last month.
Yeah.
So we did January. Remember January? It was all miserable and cold and horrible, and everybody was skint. We did death.
Yes.
And then now we're coming to month 2, so February. So it's brightened up a bit. It's lightened up a bit. So we'll do it a bit lighter.
Yes, good.
So we're going to look, really obviously because this is all coming out of the Cornermen support service, and we're going to look at things that kind of keep us going, keep us together, keep us safe, keep us resilient, keep us able to deal with the turbulence that life can bring, which is kind of what the Cornermen is about. And obviously you help people to deal with those turbulent times in the Cornermen. And we were going to identify 2 subjects. I identified 10, didn't I?
Yes.
I said, let's do the top 10 things that help keep you sane.
Maybe condense it down and do it a bit at a time.
Yes, you were like, what? I want to be in and out in half an hour.
We'll do one later.
Yeah, we'll do 2. So we're going to do 2.
Yeah.
And so we've picked 2 out of that list of 10. And we're going to cover those today. And this is just really about things that we think are important, things maybe we need to think about, things that we need in our life, and the things that help us help us to build and adapt resilience. So your choice was
Humour.
Humour.
Yeah, and I think I don't quite know what I want to say about humour, but I think it's important to point out. This is me and you talking about what we feel. It's our opinions. We want to be clear about that. But humour is thinking about those things we use in the Cornermen. I think although we're a suicide prevention service and we talk about some very heavy subjects that come up, humour is actually used quite a lot, and I think there's something about humour that is very protective for us. The ability to I don't know quite what it is, to be able to laugh, to just sometimes I think when we're having a conversation and it is very, very dark, and then just often what happens is I've noticed that when we're having a really dark conversation, it's almost, I call it coming up for air.
Mm-hmm.
Someone, whether it be me or the person I'm talking to, can just throw out if you can throw out a good one-liner, it almost is like you're coming back up for air, and then we go back down into kind of talking about some quite heavy stuff. And you would think that's quite counterintuitive while we're in, talking about this really kind of, emotional, that you shouldn't make any jokes. And, at some points you shouldn't, but I think a well-timed comment by someone can really you can feel the mood kind of.
Are you talking about a kind of gallows humour, though? Are you talking about, trying to find some humour in very dark situations? You're not. So you're still in that kind of dark situation.
Yeah.
You're not talking about coming out of it and making it a light wisecrack. You're talking about finding humour within that.
Yeah, you're not talking about, taking the mickey out of someone.
Yeah.
And I think, with humour, and I think, I don't know, but it'd be interesting to hear from the ladies' point of view, but from me, men, lads, always, there's a lot of joking around. I think it's a kind of bonding thing. And, me and you, I love you to bits, John, but I tease you mercilessly.
Yeah, I kind of enjoy that, and I give as good as I ever give.
I love the getting it back. And so I don't know. And that was with my mates as well. It was a kind of how we show affection. And I think it can be done very, very wrong. And I think you can sense when there's love in it.
Yeah. I think that's the key.
I think that's
where it comes from.
Where it comes from, how it's delivered, and why you're doing it. Because you get it wrong, you can really upset someone. And also, I think people do use that kind of. I was only joking. You weren't. You were having a dig.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that that phrase. It's not an action that makes the thing right or wrong. It's the purpose behind the action.
Yeah.
And if the purpose is to hurt or to wound, then that is quite apparent. Even though you might be saying the same thing. Yeah. But if the purpose is to alleviate, to lighten, I think the key to that is somebody that does it with the positive purpose behind it is always willing to take one back.
Yes.
And almost wants one back. It's like often, when you say these things to me, I think it's like this is an opportunity to return the ball.
Yeah.
This is not.
I find it funny.
Yeah.
You've said, you called me some horrible names, John.
Yeah.
It's been very funny.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah. No, but and I think there is elements of that within the Cornermen that we use, especially I would say, once a week we have our Friday afternoon session at 3 p.m, which is an open session, and we don't talk about issues or anything. That is just exercise with Zoran, one of the coaches here, and then once a month we have with Joe, who's a great boxer and a coach here, and there's a lot of laughter, and Joe and Zoran make sure there's a lot of laughter, and the guys, I hate the term banter, but people talking, and even people who anxious, and it's not easy to come out, and join in with things. We appreciate that, but we always make it clear that if any group understands feeling anxious, it's going to be us lot. And to see people, I think to come out and being just in that kind of environment where everyone's trying to have fun, I think that sometimes is much more kind of powerful than any word you can say.
Yeah.
The greatest conversation I can have. If you can get someone, they're feeling like shit and they're down, you can get them and they come along, and we're exercising, and I'm teasing Zoran, Zoran's teasing me, or something funny happens, there's laughter, and people to be in that environment, or Joe's putting on some funny music and doing a dance. I'm a really big believer in atmosphere. So I think you can be in an atmosphere, and if someone walks in a really bad mood, it affects everyone. Even I would say that sometimes someone coming in a really bad mood is kind of more powerful than someone coming in a good mood. Negative energy can really suck the room. Yeah. But if you can, for someone to come into a nice environment, warm welcome, for how are you, and to be able to feel having fun, to remind people to have fun. Yeah. And it's difficult if someone's in depression. We're not talking about absolute crisis. We're just talking about things that keep us healthy and safe through the trials of life, as you were saying at the beginning. And to have fun and to have a laugh, I think we've got to really try and make time to do that. Yeah. I think it's quite essential for our mental well-being.
Yeah, I think it's important. I think it's interesting you say about that gallows humour as well. And I've read that there was a lot of humour in the trenches.
Yes.
Which is like the closest approximation to hell probably that we've largely come to.
Well, sorry, John, say.
Well, I was going to say we had, in 2007, we had a load of guys from the Rifles come to us, and there was a guy in here who was a colonel in the Rifles, and we said we'll have a boxing show to raise money for the Rifles. The Rifles at that time were in Helmand province in Afghanistan. There was lots of casualties, and so we held this boxing show, and the Rifles were very supportive. They sent a band down, and they sent down a load of guys from the boxing team, the Rifles boxing team, and they'd all been injured, wounded in Afghanistan. And some of them kind of less than that. Some of them had bullet holes that kind of healed and all this sort of thing. One of them was a guy who had been the most injured serviceman ever to survive at that point on a battlefield. Wow. With the pioneer, they pioneer these medical techniques, and they, medevac people out. So he'd lost both legs, an arm and an eye. And, had been very, very badly burnt by this explosion. And his name was Corporal Ferguson, and he was an incredible chap. And they were, but the way those guys together, there's about 7 of them came down, and we went out, for a bite to eat before the show, and then they came to the show, and then we went out for, for the after party afterwards, and the way they mercilessly teased each other. And I always remember we were sort of at the front by the ring, and the band came in and did the national anthem. I said, can everybody please be standing for the national anthem? So we all stood up. Corporal Ferguson's lost both legs, and he's in a wheelchair at the front of the stage. And of course, they turned to him. They went, "You're not standing then, Fergie."
Yeah.
And it's like that sort of thing, could be set up. But then they all laughed. I think, like you say, it's important within there.
Within know where the love is.
Yes, and because they were supporting each other, the support. Yeah. You could see that humour and that kind of almost cutting humour between them, but the support between them all, because I think they'd all been through that experience together. Yeah. They knew what they were talking about. I'm sure. Somebody else coming in and saying that would be very different. Very different. But, together that bonded them, and I think that bonded them and it alleviated it, very similar to the situations you're talking about. Yeah. And that was quite stark for me, to show in the face of that suffering, you could use that humour to alleviate that suffering.
Well, it reminds me of, my granddad was in the war. And before he got called up, he lived in London, so the heavy bombing. And one of the things I remember telling me a story of, he's taken my nan to the pictures, and on the way home, like the air raid starts, and he says we're diving in and out of air raid shelters, bombs start falling. It sounds terrifying, but the thing, rather than saying it was terrifying, it was traumatic. I was trying to get home. I was worried about your nan. What's going to happen to us? This might be. The story he tells was we were running through bombs falling out of London, and there's shrapnel flying everywhere. And your nan turns to me and says, "Well, you're all right. You're wearing a hat." But that kind of, but there was lots of stories like that where the humour, I think, and I've talked, with firefighters who say, after a shout, sometimes they have to just say that, and I think sometimes knowing what you shouldn't say helps you say what you should say.
Yeah.
Because in my brain, a lot of the time, I know what is the worst thing to say at this exact moment.
Yeah.
But, also what's the right thing to say.
Yeah, yeah.
I think you've got to know both, and I think humour, what was you watched? The laughter of our children. What's the...
Oh, the Bobby Sands quote. Our revenge will be the laughter of our children.
The laughter.
Yeah, I love that quote.
Yeah. And there's just something about laughter, I love laughing.
Yeah.
I love to have a laugh.
Yeah, yeah.
And that doesn't mean that I can't be serious, and talk about, lots of dick, but, I do like having a laugh.
Yeah.
For me, seeing my mates, joking with you, joking around here, it's what keeps my mental well-being going. The exercise, the atmosphere, the joking, I like being around it.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah.
That's why I really wanted to sort of talk about humour, I think.
Well, I suppose it's an essential component of good mental health in a way. I know we bandy this word around, and I was saying to you the other day, we all bandy it, and it's been, quite ubiquitous, mental health, but nobody ever says what mental health means. And I heard a good definition the other day, and mental health is not being happy.
No.
Mental health is having the ability, the resilience to deal with bad situations that come along in life, and having the ability to know through that resilience that they will pass, and to deal with them at the time rather than being pulled under by them.
Yeah.
And I think humour is a vital component of doing that. During those times, you've got to be able to. It gives you a mental break.
I think it
like you say,
stick the middle finger up to the tough times. It's almost like a fuck you to the tough times. I can I'm going to find some light in this.
Yeah.
I'm going to laugh in the face of you.
Yeah.
And if it's not always possible, but if you can do it.
Yeah.
I think it kind of it's very freeing.
Yeah.
Laughing.
Yeah, definitely.
Stuff. I wonder why we evolved it. It's just
yeah.
It's just like
you don't see many other animals with a sense of humour, I suppose, do you?
I mean, maybe monkeys haven't, but I don't know. But yeah, you don't see like proper belly laughing when you go, and your tears, that laugh where you actually can't breathe.
Yeah. No, you say that. I mean, it's like don't see dog jokes.
Yeah.
There aren't really such a thing, are they? They do lots of other things like yawning and scratching and playing, but they don't laugh.
So it seems like we've talked about music, but it seems that laughter seems
peculiarly human.
Yeah, and so it must be there for a reason. We must have developed it for a reason.
Yeah.
I'm sure that maybe some people would know, but it just seems to me an essential part of getting through these times.
Yeah.
The brilliant example of the army guys there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was what I wanted to bring up for humour, really. Just
Okay.
after death.
Yes.
So
we transcended death now.
Yeah, we transcended.
Using our humour.
Yeah. So.
So I was going to pick one off the list.
Yeah.
So you picked humour, and I was going to be a bit more serious, a bit more earnest.
Of course, John.
And that's me.
Yeah.
And I was going to pick faith.
Okay.
And I think faith is quite an important cornerstone of your life to support you. Not everybody has it, and fewer people I know have it these days. And so I don't want to be too, talk about this in the sense of, I would say I'm a Christian, but don't really want to talk about it in the sense of being a Christian.
So
I want to widen it out to more of a, I don't really want to go down that religion route. Like I always, that thing, religions are created by men, and spirituality comes from God. And so I think it's that spirituality, that recognition of God. Now I choose to recognise God through Jesus, but I don't want to alienate anybody about that. I've got lots of friends who are Muslims who talk, I think it's very, very similar, the idea behind it. And then when we talk about things like the AA and other organisations that talk about the higher power, it's this idea of the higher power. and how you choose to interpret that or how you choose to connect that. I'm not saying any one way is better than another, really. I'm saying that, I've got a way that works for me. So I wanted to put that out there first, because I don't want to just
people
alienate loads of people. But I think it's a very important component of life. And I think it's, understanding or thinking about that higher power. There's a bit in the Sermon on the Mount when Jesus says, he's talking about, don't fret about, see the lilies of the field and all that sort of thing. They neither toil nor spin. Don't fret about what you should wear. Don't fret about what you should eat. And it sounds a bit like Jesus is a bit of a hippie and just saying, look, don't sweat it, man. It'll come out all right. But then, he follows it up with that sort of killer line where he says,
make a joke.
It doesn't make a joke. Right. It wasn't the moment for a joke. Maybe somebody did, but that wasn't recorded. But
no, that's a different thing.
He says, so we got a fusion of faith and humour here. There you go, Life of Brian.
Life of Brian.
So it says, but focus your eyes on the kingdom of God, and all these things will be given to you. And first of all, you think that's just a bit hippie, but I think what he's saying is that idea of focusing on the best possible thing you can imagine, kind of all the time. So a very difficult thing to do, but think of the best. What is God? Well, God is the best possible good, the highest possible good that you can ever imagine, even beyond what you can imagine. And kind of that's God. It's all the great good things in life that, you can put together. And if you focus on that, you are likely to succeed in other areas if you're focusing more on that. And that's the more important thing. And also, even if those things that you're focused on down here fail, you're thinking about what's higher, what's more important, what's, and to an extent, what's really in control and what it's really all about. So I think that's an important component of faith. And I think having that faith in your corner, because we talk about, obviously, our analogy of the cornermen and life's a fight, and you need someone in your corner to advise you during rounds. You need someone to advise you when the rounds aren't going well. You don't need the cornerman so much when the rounds are going, when the rounds are going badly. You don't need the cornerman so much when the rounds are going well. You need them when they're going badly. And I think if you have that faith, for me, it's Jesus in your corner. That Jesus is someone to go back to. It's somebody who's been through those trials of life, somebody who understands, somebody who cares. And you've got that strength, because you're asking for strength at that time. You're asking for strength, guidance, advice. And I think you can get that from that spirituality and from that feeling that this is not it. This is not the end. And whatever I've lost when those storms hit, those storms of life hit, whatever I've lost or whatever I'm coping with or dealing with, there's someone there to advise me and help. Not just you.
No. Well, I think we certainly. Oh, just talking about God's creatures and you swatter.
Yeah. I've got that mosquito. That was bugging me. If anybody's watching it on YouTube, you'll have seen that buzzing around my head for 10 minutes.
I think, one of the misconceptions I think that people is that we're very rational now. If it's not, can't be proved, and, people want fact, so rather than take an analogy or kind of wisdom, it's like, well, that must be rubbish. Everything gets thrown out. When actually, last week when I talked about, or the last podcast when I talked about Kisagutami, that kind of Buddhist parable,
and the mustard seed,
and I think there's a lot in those kind of these works that have been written by all sorts of why it's not about what happens when it's about how to live and how to survive these. And most of the messages are about that life is suffering. The most of the world religions, life is suffering, and this is, you need this, these are things that you can help overcome those.
How you prevent yourself being overwhelmed by the suffering, how you can carry the burden of the suffering, bear the suffering, and even transcend the suffering and turn it into something good. So, and it's possible to do that. And
we talk, when you were talking about that higher power, often we sort of say, the conversation with people is, who, if you could imagine the person you would want to be, who do you want to be? What does the kind of best version of you looks like? And encourage people will sort of like, I'd like to, I want to stop taking so much ketamine. I want to, be a good father. I want to do whatever, And so saying, well, aim for that. That's good. And that's almost like you're talking about, that kind of symbol of the higher power of God. If it's an ultimate goodness that you're aiming for or to achieve, is well, call out to yourself for that. Who do I want to be? While I'm on this earth, where do I want to get to? You know, and you might not get there, but aim for it.
Well, I think that's the important thing, is also to acknowledge that if you aim that high, you're going to miss because of your mortal failings and everything else. But if you keep aiming, you're going to get somewhere near it. Or even if you don't get near it, you're going to improve from where you are now.
Yeah.
And that's the important thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's, and that's the whole thing about a lot of religions. A lot of people look at religions, you say, with irrationality. And they say, well, that person is a terrible person, that person is a hypocrite, that person is a liar, and they're a religious person. Therefore, religion is worthless.
Yeah.
But, you've got to look at it as maybe that person would be worse without that religion. Religion, I think, in my experience, raises people up because it forces or makes you look and think about the kingdom, whatever you want to call it, the higher power, that there's something greater than us, that there's something more than us. But it doesn't turn you into a perfect person. It's just in the same way, people say, well, look, I went to church for years and then my mother still died, or I prayed and they still died. Again, that I don't really want to say religion because we're talking about religion and spirituality and trying to kind of separate them a little bit, doesn't protect you from these events, doesn't protect you from these storms in life. What it might enable you to do is deal with those storms, because a lot of the stories that are told in those great texts, whether it's Buddhist, Christian, Muslim, Hindu, a lot of those stories that are told are about dealing with that suffering, transcending that suffering, and normally trying to make something good out of that suffering. It's not about avoiding the suffering, although that may come about as a natural way of acting in a certain way. It's more about trying to bear and transcend the suffering. And I think that's a very important message. And again, this is what we're talking about a bit with the humour. It's about not being overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Not being dragged down.
Yeah, and I sometimes think that, because we're so analytical, a lot of people, if these texts think it's a kind of explanation of how the world came about, when actually a lot of it can be applied for how our consciousness came about, how we developed. There's a lot of analogy in the stories that I think if you take literally, I don't think that was how it was meant.
No, not at all. I mean, if you take the Garden of Eden,
yeah,
it sounds like a silly, childish idea. There was a garden where everything was lovely. But if you think, well, why is it a garden? Why did we start in a garden? Well, what is a garden? A garden is like this perfect mix of nature, but the nature is tame. So it's not a threat to us. It's not terrible to us. Because you get dropped in the jungle.
Don't do that to me, John.
No. But I was thinking
I'd probably be all right.
To crack a few jokes.
Yeah. Life out.
Yeah. You'll die very quickly, and that's nature. That's nature untamed. Yeah. And then no nature at all, concrete tower block, is not very good either. But what you want is a garden. So it's the ideal state. It's a balance. So it's a balance, and then it's saying, look, the balance has been upset, and you want to go back to the balance. That's what you're looking for. That ideal sort of route between chaos and order. You're trying to sort of control things.
Yeah, and I think we're talking about what works for us, and what you're saying is it's your faith. And actually it's none of one else's business.
Yeah.
Ultimately, what anyone thinks. If it works for you and it keeps you feeling like you've got meaning and purpose. And I think that's probably one of the things that annoys me about people is or that everyone has to put everyone down. Well, if John, so if that's John, why have you got? If that's working for someone, why have you got to knock it for him? Why? Okay, you don't agree with it. Fair enough.
And I think as long as it's not causing harm to anyone else.
Yeah. So why, if it's working and it works for people, I've got my own faith, and so it's nothing to do with anyone else. It's personal.
Yeah.
And it's about protecting. We're talking about protecting our own mental well-being. If it helps us to do what we want to do.
Well, it's also, like I say, it is very personal. It's supposed to be that personal relationship with God. Well, that's the way I see it. And that's what I see as Jesus' message, is that personal relationship that you need to have and foster with God. And without it, you'll be a bit lost. And without it, you may not be able to withstand the storms. So that's what I see as that message. And so that's something you should foster and encourage within yourself. But that's kind of up to you. And I think, things like church can help, can be useful, but it shouldn't get in the way, and it shouldn't replace that personal relationship with God.
Sorry, John, my head's just going, what? I'd love if, can we not, when you're walking around the club, get you a dog collar?
Well,
I think that would be so good.
That kind of goes.
Father Houston's here.
Yeah.
We don't need a tattoo parlour at the back. We have a little.
Yeah.
Confessional. I've come to see you, John.
Yeah, but I think what I was saying is I don't want a dog collar. That's the point. I don't want to be that. I don't want to be. It's not elevated. It's a personal
I think
relationship.
You look good in a dog collar, though.
Oh well, maybe.
Or one of them red robes.
Well, with the big hats.
Cardinal.
I'd like a big hat.
Cardinal Houston.
Do you know, I went to Rome recently, and of course in Rome they have these shops, which kind of makes you think of Father Ted. But they have these shops where they kit out, you know, the priests, the cardinals, all this sort of thing. And in the windows they have the most ornate robes and hats and scepters and everything. You go in there and dress up like a cardinal, like a bishop, like whatever you want.
Anyone can buy them.
Well, I presume so. I mean, it's a shop.
Card.
It's a shop. It's open.
Yeah.
You can, yeah. I'm sure if you go in, I mean, it's expensive, very expensive. So I'm sure if you go in there and say, I want some of that. But it was like the Versace of religious get-up, you know. So I mean, I was looking at the window, going, oh blimey.
Bishops might
Bring you back the hat.
When you go on stage with the Cornermen.
Yes.
There's a gimmick: cowboy boots, and then dressed like a pope. Oh,
Yes.
You probably shouldn't do that.
Not yet, no.
Oh no, yeah.
No, not at the moment. Not a good time.
Yeah.
So that was what I wanted to pick off there. Faith. I think faith in a higher power. Thinking, you know, and you can think about through all sorts of different religions. Faith in something beyond you, something outside of you, something permanent, something indivisible, something that looks after you, something that cares about you, something that is beyond our understanding. As you said, well, I can't explain it, I can't show it to you, but there are things that are beyond our understanding. You know, we see a little sliver of the universe. We see a little sliver of reality for a very short time.
Yeah, we're not.
So,
you know, when you think about what I always think about is like how the Earth's been 1 million years old, and I've been here for 44 years.
Yeah.
It's really not very long to think you know everything, is it?
No.
That you've discovered all the mysteries of the world and you've got all the answers to everything. It's like we're literally here for about 80 years. We know pretty little.
If you're lucky.
If you're lucky.
Yeah.
And I think it's better to accept that.
Yeah.
Than pretend you know everything.
That there's certain things you don't know.
Yeah.
So so that's about. And I find that a comfort. I find that, you know, it helps my resilience.
Yeah.
Helps my ability to cope. You know, and he's very just that thought. There's, you know, there's something higher. And I think I'm certainly not alone in that. You know, there's many people that think that, and I think even like organisations that are not specifically religious, like AA, would say that you need to submit to a higher power. You need to say. And this is something that religions say, I'm not in control.
Yeah.
I can't do this on my own. I can't deal with this crisis on my own. I'm not in control. I have to kind of hand that control over to a higher power.
Yeah, I think that's right. It works on many levels. You know, you get people who are trying to do, they don't want to talk about what's going on for them. So they try and manage it on their own. And you, like, even if you don't accept a higher power, but we can't manage the problems of life on our own. That's just impossible, you know. And I think one of the hardest things is to see people trying to fight addiction or whatever, saying, "Oh, I'll get it." Go and seek help. No, I'll deal with it. You know, to me, you're on a hiding for nothing.
Yeah.
Not because you're weak, but because no one can do it.
No one can do it, and then you fail. And by the nature of what you've said, you're going to blame yourself for failing, so you're in a cycle that's just going to break you.
So, you know, that's when we talk about getting out and asking for help. You know, it's not, it's an essential part of who we are. We need others around us to even just to unburden.
Yeah.
You know, you think about confessional, I suppose. You know, just to unburden. People feel better once they've said what's on. Oh God, I can feel so much better that I've told someone. You know, I've been carrying that around.
And I think it's not only that we're programmed to share these things to make us feel better, to share that burden, to make us feel better, to talk to other people. It's not only that. I think we're also programmed to help. So we're programmed from the other side as well, which is why people should reach out. Is that we are programmed to get involved with other people, to help other people, and I think that makes us feel human. That makes us feel worthwhile. And as we said, you know, I mean, it's that feeling of worth, that feeling of meaning, and part of that meaning comes from looking after other people and feeling that you're a useful person and feeling that you're an important person and you have responsibilities that you can fulfill.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think that that is an important part of it. And we're not always going to be, you know, that nice steady person who's just helping out. And we're not always going to be that kind of desperate person who's on the edge and needs to reach out.
Yeah.
We're always going to be a mixture of those two, but we need to be a mixture of those two, I think, to function properly. and be a proper social creature, which we are.
Yeah, so I completely agree. So I'd always encourage anyone to start, if you need, not to struggle through on your own, and reach out.
Yeah.
Whether it be the Cornermen or whoever's about.
Yeah.
It's not a sign of weakness.
No, no. And I think also an important part of reaching out is if you do that, it will aid your recovery from whatever you're suffering from, and it will probably aid you in helping other people as well. Yeah. So it's almost like, it's an amazing thing. If you could put that in someone's head, it's like, I don't want to reach out, I don't want to be a burden, I don't want to be selfish. It's like, well, what you got to think about what you're doing is, by making yourself better, you're going to be able to help other people. This is your journey to helping other people. And that makes people think, well, I'll do it then, if it's going to help other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned burden there. A lot of people will say, I didn't think I wanted to get in touch because, I'm sure there's other people more worse off than I am. And then they tell their story, and it's, wow, and so people don't want to reach out because there's other people in more need than I am, or I'll be a burden, and so and burdensomeness is one of the things we talk about a lot, that feeling of and that's why people say my family would be better off without me, I'm so they'll miss me for a bit, but actually once I'm gone, actually they'll be a lot better off, all those kind of things come into play. We hear that a lot, and it's so if people are feeling that they're a burden, that's definitely a time to try and just watch those thoughts coming into your head.
Yeah, yeah.
And that is something that always amazes me. Where the dark thoughts come from. People are almost living in their head with like an abuser, telling them how useless they are, telling them how rubbish they are. And you think, we always think we'd be much more in control of our heads and our thoughts and our emotion, our actions than we would be. Should be quite simple. We think, right, well, why do I keep doing something I don't want to keep doing? Why wouldn't I just say, right, to stop it?
Yeah.
Stop it. But you kind of get these, and people, lie in your own head, I'll go and do this, but actually I end up over there doing something I've said I don't want to do, and, and so that's always an interesting thought for me, is, where all these kind of thoughts and stuff come from. And if they are, reach out if they're coming in a lot. So if I've dragged it down again, we went deaf.
We started getting happy, didn't we? You started off happy.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose that brings it full circle, because you started off with a happiness. I brought it down a little bit, and then you dragged it right down.
Yeah.
So so I suppose we'll call it a wrap then for episode 2 on that.
Yeah.
And you were right, by the way.
Was I?
Well, 2
Oh, is that recorded?
Well, if we'd have done 10, bearing in mind we've done 2 in half an hour, we'd be on 5-hour podcast.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
We'd need a break.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, so I suppose that's episode 2. I suppose, really, we'll get even more cheery for episode 3. Maybe we'll do something, even lighter.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Bring the guitar.
Yeah. Well, funnily enough, I brought it now.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
All right. Brilliant. Cheers, Steve. Well, that's episode 2 of the Cornermen. We'll be back next month with episode 3.
Great. See you then.